Now I get the absolutely immense pleasure of introducing another of our VIPs, an honoured guest, Robin has already mentioned. Jack Mundey AO is one of the heroes of Australian radical activism and politics. The unionist, a conservationist, a communist, a champion of social justice, and as you all know, a key figure in the historic green bands that did so much to protect the built and natural environment in this state. Jack is patron these days of the Historic Houses Trust of New South Wales. It was Glebe's great good fortune that in 1969 and the years thereafter, a brilliant and constructive alliance brought the Builders Labourers Federation, New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation, into the local fight against the forces determined to push through an expressway. But that's Jack's story. May I introduce Jack?
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Well, it's difficult to walk down memory lane for 5 minutes. But I guess that the most important thing in this gathering is to see the historic importance of the resident action groups. At a time when our democracy is threatened, I think it's important that grassroots activity is remembered, because we wouldn't be here tonight had it not been for the resident action groups. The resident action groups were the people who fought to save Glebe, to save Victoria Street, to save Kelly's Bush, Centennial Park in that period. And of course, when you look back, you have to say that the people that came together because of commitment. And at that period, Sydney was under threat, because it's all very good now to say that we've got heritage legislation, even though people might say a lot of that has been eroded. But there wouldn't ever be any heritage legislation had it not been for the action of ordinary people back in the 60s and 70s, including the Glebe Society. It was a grassroots organisation that led to the first heritage legislation being introduced. That should never be forgotten. I remember Neville Wren pointing out to me that if it hadn't been for the builders, labourers and the green bands, he would never have got through the heritage legislation he got through in the 70s, the late 70s. And I think that's important. That mass action is always important. Can never ever leave it to Macquarie Street, or for that matter to George Street, alone, without people in action. And I'm sure that Clave would agree with that. There's got to be people's action, involving people wider than just the elected officials to determine the future. And all our history goes back that way. When I came into the building industry in the late 50s, the tallest building in Sydney was Cullowalla Chambers, 13-storey building on the corner of Castlereagh and King Street. And then, of course, the sky became the limit. And between the Depression years of the 30s right through to the 60s, there was virtually no building in Sydney area at all. And so in that period, we saw a change occurred when the Askin government, well, first of all, the Labor government, in the Carl government, lifted the limit. And when the building industry commenced in the post-war period, well, of course, the sky became the limit. And things changed. People's understanding changed. And in fact, if you look back at the yellowing pages of the Sydney papers, you'll see we're getting big. We're going to become an international city. We're going higher and bigger. Yeah, bigger is better. Biggest is best. That sort of thinking. And it wasn't until people like yourselves in the Glebe Society and the resident action groups, and it's good to remember that there's over 170 resident action groups in the 60s and 70s in this city. And the reason we've got 400 buildings in New South Wales that were saved because of the action of ordinary people. Those buildings have been gone forever. And so even though we lost a lot, we gained a lot. And I think that we've got to learn from that. And we should cherish this occasion, because for 40 years ago, the Glebe Society were one of the leaders in fighting for ordinary people having a say in the future of our heritage. And for that reason we should be all celebrate tonight and resolve our efforts to ensure that once again heritage is under attack. Because where it was the Askin government that did so much damage in that period, in the 60s to the 70s, the other Labor governments since that time have shown very little consideration to the importance of heritage. And so I think that we've got to redouble our efforts to make sure that whoever's in power in Macquarie Street, we've got to tell them that they can't destroy all of Sydney. And therefore we've got to fight for the heritage we own, for the heritage that we've built, and the heritage we want to inherit. Thank you.